On our vow. Renewal day, my husband locked me out. This party is for my new woman, not you. I nodded calmly and left. 1 hour later, he realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life because I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong when Desmond insisted I wear the navy blue dress instead of the ivory one I had chosen for our vow renewal ceremony. 25 years of marriage, and I had learned to read the signs. The way his jaw tightened when he was hiding something. The way his eyes avoided mine when guilt was eating at him. But that morning, as I stood in our bedroom adjusting the unfamiliar navy fabric, I thought his nervousness was about renewing our commitment to each other. How naive I was. The Riverside Country Club buzzed with activity when we arrived. White roses cascaded from every surface, their sweet scent mixing with the expensive perfumes of our guests. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the marble floors, and gold silk draping transformed the ballroom into something that belonged in a magazine. I had planned every detail myself, spending weeks coordinating with florists and caterers, wanting everything to be perfect for our special day. Desmond had insisted we arrive separately. I want to surprise you, he had said that morning, kissing my cheek with lips that felt cold against my skin. So I drove myself to the club, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. After all these years, the idea of renewing our vows still made me nervous in the most wonderful way. The guests were already mingling when I entered through the main doors. Colleagues from Desmond's law firm, neighbors from our upscale subdivision, friends we had accumulated over the decades. Everyone was dressed in their finest, champagne glasses, catching the light as they laughed and chatted. I searched the crowd for my husband's familiar face, eager to see his expression when he saw how beautiful everything looked. I found him standing near the altar we had set up at the front of the room. He looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. But he wasn't alone. A young woman stood beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She was stunning in the way that only youth can be, with honey blonde hair that caught the light, and a figure that her emerald green dress displayed to perfection. My steps slowed as I approached them. Something about the way they stood together, the way she looked up at him with adoring eyes, sent a chill down my spine. But I pushed the feeling away. Desmond worked with many attractive women. This was probably just another colleague. Carol! Desmond's voice carried across the room as he spotted me. But there was something forced about his smile, something that made my stomach tighten with unease. Everyone, I need your attention. The conversations died down as our guests turned toward us. I stood there, suddenly feeling exposed under their collective gaze. Desmond stepped forward, his arm sliding around the young woman's waist in a gesture that made my breath catch in my throat. I know you all came here tonight expecting to witness Carol and me renewing our vows, he began, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. But I have something more important to share with all of you. My legs felt weak beneath me. The champagne glass in my hand trembled, the crystal singing a high, fragile note. I want you all to meet Marlowe, Desmond continued, his eyes shining with an emotion I had never seen him direct toward me. The woman I should have been with all along. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Gasps echoed through the room, but they sounded distant, like they were coming from underwater. I watched as Marlowe smiled up at Desmond, her perfectly manicured fingers playing with what looked like an engagement ring on her left hand. This celebration isn't for Carol and me, Desmond announced, his voice growing stronger, more confident. It's for Marlowe and me. This is our engagement party. The champagne glass slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking dreams. The golden liquid spread across the white stone, and I stared at it, unable to process what I was hearing. Carol, Desmond said, his voice softer now but no less cruel. This party is for my new woman, not you. I think it would be best if you left. 25 years. 25 years of marriage, of building a life together, of believing in forever. And he was dismissing me like an unwanted guest at my own vow renewal ceremony. The humiliation burned through me like acid, making it hard to breathe. I looked around the room at the faces of people I had considered friends. Some looked shocked, others embarrassed. A few seemed almost excited by the drama unfolding before them. But no one stepped forward to defend me. No one spoke up. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I could feel Marlowe's eyes on me, studying my reaction with the curiosity of someone watching a car accident. She was young enough to be my daughter, beautiful enough to make me feel ancient in comparison. And she was wearing the smile of a woman who had won. But something strange happened as I stood there in that ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and my dignity. Instead of the hysteria I expected to feel, instead of the tears that should have been streaming down my face, a peculiar calm settled over me. I bent down slowly, carefully, and picked up the largest piece of the broken champagne glass. My movements were deliberate, controlled. When I straightened up, I looked directly at Desmond for the first time since his announcement. "Congratulations," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I hope you'll be very happy together." I set the glass fragment on a nearby table with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silent room. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble with measured precision. Each step felt like a decision, like a door closing behind me. "Carol, wait!" someone called out behind me. I didn't turn to see who it was. At the entrance to the ballroom, I paused and looked back one more time. Desmond was already turning away from me, his attention focused entirely on Marlowe. She was gazing up at him with the same adoring expression, but now there was something else in her eyes too. Triumph. I walked out of that country club with my head held high, leaving behind the life I had known for over 2 decades. My car keys felt foreign in my hand as I made my way across the parking lot. The evening air was cool against my skin, carrying the scent of honeysuckle from the club's gardens. As I sat in my car, key in the ignition, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I expected to see devastation, to see the face of a woman whose world had just collapsed. Instead, I saw something that surprised me: determination. Because here's what Desmond didn't know, what none of them knew. The woman he had just humiliated so publicly, the wife he had dismissed so carelessly, was not the helpless victim they all assumed me to be. I started the engine and drove away from the Riverside Country Club, leaving behind the sound of laughter and celebration that should have been mine. But I wasn't driving toward defeat. I was driving toward something much more powerful, something that would change everything. The house felt different when I returned that night. Every familiar object seemed to mock me with memories of the life I thought I had been living. The wedding photo on the mantel, taken 25 years ago when I believed in forever. The throw pillows I had carefully arranged that morning, thinking Desmond and I would come home together as a renewed couple. Even the scent of the vanilla candles I had lit before leaving seemed cloying now, artificial. I walked through our home like a stranger, my navy blue dress rustling with each step. The silence was deafening after the humiliation at the country club. I kept expecting Desmond to walk through the door to tell me it had all been some twisted joke. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't be coming home tonight. Or any night. I made myself a cup of tea with hands that had finally stopped trembling, then sat at our kitchen table, staring at the ceramic surface Desmond had insisted we install 3 years ago. He had said it was an investment in our future. Now I wondered if he had already been planning his exit then. That's when I noticed his laptop bag was gone from its usual spot by the front door. His reading glasses were missing from the side table. Small things, but they told a story of someone who had been preparing to leave for some time. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. The master suite we had shared for so many years looked the same, but I could sense the emptiness now. When I opened Desmond's closet, my suspicions were confirmed. His best suits were gone, his favorite ties. the watch his father had given him. But it was what I found in his nightstand drawer that truly broke my heart. Tucked beneath some old magazines was a small velvet box. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing a diamond ring that was easily twice the size of my own modest wedding band. The receipt was still inside the box. $15,000, purchased 6 months ago. 6 months. He had been planning this humiliation for half a year. I sank onto our bed, the ring box falling from my numb fingers. The betrayal cut deeper than the public humiliation had. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a midlife crisis. This was calculated, premeditated. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Desmond had come to his senses. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to tell me he had made a terrible mistake. But the message wasn't from Desmond. It was from my sister-in-law, Jennifer. "Carol, I'm so sorry about tonight. I had no idea Desmond was planning that. Are you okay?" Before I could respond, another message appeared, then another. Word was spreading quickly through our social circle. I could imagine the conversations happening right now, the speculation about what had led to such a public disaster. I turned off my phone and walked to my closet to change out of the navy dress that had become a costume for my own humiliation. As I hung it up, I wondered if I would ever wear it again. Probably not. It would always remind me of the night my marriage died. I pulled on comfortable clothes and wandered back downstairs, drawn by a restlessness I couldn't name. In the living room, I found myself standing before our bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines of volumes we had collected together over the years. Classic literature mixed with legal texts, travel guides for trips we had taken, cookbooks for dinner parties we had hosted. My hand stopped on a particular book, one that looked like all the others but held secrets Desmond knew nothing about. I pulled it from the shelf, and it came away easily, revealing the hidden safe built into the wall behind it. I had installed this safe 7 years ago, telling Desmond it was for our important documents and jewelry. He had nodded absently, more interested in his evening news than in household security. He had no idea what I really kept inside. My fingers trembled slightly as I entered the combination. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing stacks of papers, contracts, and documents that represented something Desmond had never imagined I was capable of building. I pulled out one of the folders and opened it on the coffee table. Property deeds, business licenses, client contracts, all bearing my name and my name alone. This was my real life, the one I had been living in secret for the past 15 years while playing the role of the dutiful wife. The first property deed was dated 12 years ago. A small office building downtown that I had purchased with money saved from my freelance consulting work. Desmond thought I was just keeping busy with small projects while he built his law practice. He had no idea I was building something of my own. The second property was a strip mall on the east side of town, purchased 8 years ago. Then came the apartment complex, the medical building, the row of townhouses near the university. Each purchase had been carefully planned and expertly executed while Desmond remained oblivious to what his wife was really doing with her time. I spread the documents across the coffee table like a poker hand, revealing a royal flush. 23 properties in total, generating $18,000 in monthly rental income. A consulting business with clients in 6 states. Bank accounts and investment portfolios that Desmond had never seen. While he had been building his reputation as one of the city's most successful attorneys, I had been building something much more substantial, and he had never suspected a thing. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I remembered all the times he had patted my hand condescendingly when I mentioned my little projects. The way he would change the subject when I tried to talk about my work at dinner parties, dismissing my achievements as hobbies while he held court about his latest legal victory. I thought about the sacrifices I had made for his career, the clients I had referred to him from my growing network, the social connections I had maintained for both our benefits, the countless hours I had spent supporting his ambitions while quietly building my own empire. 3 years ago, when his practice had hit a rough patch due to some bad investments, I had quietly arranged for several of my consulting clients to hire his firm for their legal needs. He never knew those referrals came from me. He thought it was just his reputation finally paying off. Last year, when he wanted to expand his office space, I had made sure the building he chose was one of mine. He had been so proud of negotiating what he thought was a good lease rate, never knowing his wife was his landlord. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Carol, this is Marlo. We need to talk. There are things you should know about Desmond and our situation. Can we meet tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long moment. What could this young woman possibly want to tell me that I didn't already know? That she was sleeping with my husband? That they were planning a future together? The evidence of their relationship had been painfully clear at the country club. But something about the tone of her message intrigued me. There was an urgency there, a hint that perhaps not everything was as simple as it had appeared tonight. I typed back a brief response. 10 a.m., Riverside Cafe. As I returned the documents to the safe, I found myself thinking about the woman who had stood beside my husband tonight, wearing his ring and basking in what she thought was her victory. Marlo had looked so confident, so certain of her position. I wondered if she knew that Desmond's success, his prestigious office, his wealthy clients, were all built on a foundation that belonged to me. I wondered if she realized that the man she thought she was stealing was actually just an empty shell, dependent on the woman he had just humiliated. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what she wanted to tell me. But tonight, I had my own revelations to process. Tonight, I had to decide what to do with the power I had been quietly accumulating for over a decade. As I locked the safe and replaced the book, I felt something shifting inside me. The devastation of earlier was being replaced by something else entirely, something colder and more calculating. Desmond thought he had discarded me like an outdated accessory. He had no idea he had just awakened something he should have left sleeping. The Riverside Cafe was nearly empty when I arrived at 10 o'clock the next morning. I chose a corner table where I could see the entrance, ordering black coffee and settling in to wait. I had barely slept, my mind cycling through decades of memories and realizations that cast my entire marriage in a new light. Marlo arrived exactly on time, but she looked different than she had at the country club. Gone was the triumphant glow, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of the designer dress from the night before. She looked younger, more vulnerable. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she slid into the seat across from me. Her voice was softer than I expected, with a slight tremor that suggested she was as nervous as I was. "What did you want to tell me?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I had no energy for small talk with the woman who had helped destroy my marriage. Marlo fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding my eyes. "I need you to know that I never wanted it to happen like that. The whole thing at the country club, the public humiliation, that was all Desmond's idea. But you went along with it." "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But there are things about Desmond you don't know, things he's been hiding from both of us." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Such as?" "He's been lying to me about money, about his success, about everything." She finally met my eyes, and I saw genuine distress there. I thought he was wealthy. I thought his law practice was thriving. But yesterday, after you left, I overheard him on the phone with someone about debts. Serious debts. A cold smile tugged at my lips. How serious? $300,000, maybe more. He owes money to clients, to other attorneys, to people who sound dangerous when they call. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. He told me he was going to inherit money from his family, that there were investments that would pay off soon. But now I'm starting to think he was lying about that too. I said nothing, just waited for her to continue. "There's something else," Marlo said, her voice dropping even lower. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Another betrayal, another layer of deception. Congratulations, I said flatly. That's why he wanted to make the announcement so public. He said it would force you to accept the situation and agree to a quick divorce. He needs to be free to marry me before the baby comes. Tears started to well up in her eyes. But I'm starting to realize that he doesn't love me. He just needs someone to take care of him. I took a slow sip of my coffee, processing this information. Desmond was deeper in debt than I had imagined, and now there was a child involved. An innocent life that would be born into this mess he had created. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think he's been using both of us, Marlo said, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. And because I need to know something. Are you really as helpless as he says you are? He told me you've never worked a real job, that you've been dependent on him for everything. But watching you last night, the way you handled that nightmare with such grace, I started to wonder if he was lying about that too. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. What do you think? I think there's more to you than he realizes. I think maybe you're not the victim in this story. For a long moment, we sat in silence. Then I made a decision that would change everything. You're right, I said simply. I'm not. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. It was simple, elegant, with my name and the words Strategic Business Consulting embossed in gold. Marlo picked it up, frowning. I don't understand. For the past 15 years, while Desmond thought I was playing house, I've been building a business empire. I own 23 commercial properties in this city, including the building where Desmond leases his office space. I have a consulting firm with clients in 6 states who pay me very well for my expertise in commercial real estate and business development. Her eyes widened as the implications began to sink in. Last month alone, my rental properties generated $18,000 in income. My consulting fees brought in another $12,000. I have investment accounts, savings accounts, and business accounts that Desmond has never seen, because he's never been interested enough in my activities to ask. Marlo stared at the business card like it might explode. But he said you were completely dependent on him financially. Desmond sees what he wants to see. He needed me to be helpless and grateful so he could feel important and powerful. So I let him believe that while I quietly built something real. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to match hers. Do you want to know the most ironic part? 3 years ago, when his practice was struggling, I anonymously arranged for several of my clients to hire his firm for their legal needs. The cases that he thought proved his brilliance and saved his reputation, they came from me. Oh my God, she whispered. And the office building he's so proud of leasing for his practice? I own that too. He's been paying rent to me for the past 18 months without knowing it. Marlo's face had gone completely pale. How is that possible? I use a property management company to handle the day-to-day operations. The lease is in the name of one of my business entities. Desmond has no idea that his monthly rent check of $4,500 goes into my account. She sat back in her chair, looking stunned. He has no idea? None. And neither do any of his colleagues or friends. I've spent years cultivating the image of the devoted wife who dabbles in little projects while her successful husband provides for her. It's amazing how invisible you can become when people don't think you're important enough to pay attention to. But why? Why let him think that? I considered her question. It was one I had asked myself many times over the years. At first, it was self-preservation. I grew up poor, and I never wanted to be financially dependent on anyone ever again. But as time went on, especially as Desmond became more condescending and dismissive, it became something else. Insurance. Insurance against what? Against exactly what happened last night. against the day when Desmond decided I wasn't useful to him anymore. I picked up my coffee cup again, noting that my hands were perfectly steady now. I've been preparing for this moment for years, even if I didn't fully realize it. Marlo was quiet for a long time, absorbing everything I had told her. Finally, she spoke. "What are you going to do now?" "That depends," I said, "on what you're going to do." "What do you mean?" I studied her face, seeing the fear and confusion there. Despite everything, despite the fact that she had slept with my husband and helped him humiliate me publicly, I felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for her. She was young and pregnant, and beginning to realize that the man she thought she loved was nothing more than an elaborate fraud. "You said you think he's been using both of us," I said finally. "You're right. The question is whether you're going to continue to let him do it." "I don't know what choice I have. I'm pregnant with his child." "You have more choices than you think, especially if you're smart about how you handle the next few weeks." She looked at me with a mixture of hope and wariness. "Are you saying you'll help me?" "I'm saying that Desmond's house of cards is about to collapse, with or without my help. The only question is whether you're going to be standing underneath it when it falls." I stood up, leaving a $10 bill on the table for my coffee. "Think about what I've told you, Marlo. Think about what kind of man would humiliate his wife of 25 years in front of a room full of people. Think about what kind of father that would make." As I walked toward the door, she called after me. "Carol, wait. What should I do?" I turned back, giving her the same calm smile I had worn at the country club the night before. "You'll figure it out. You're smarter than Desmond gives you credit for. Much smarter than he ever gave me credit for." I left her sitting there, still clutching my business card, still trying to process the revelation that the woman she thought she had defeated was actually the one holding all the power. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Not just satisfaction, but genuine excitement. For 25 years, I had hidden my true capabilities behind a mask of domestic contentment. Now, finally, it was time to show the world who I really was. Desmond had made the biggest mistake of his life when he decided to discard me so publicly. He just didn't know it yet. The call came at 7:30 the next morning, jolting me from the first peaceful sleep I had enjoyed in months. Desmond's name flashed on my phone screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won out. "Carol, we need to talk." His voice was strained, lacking the confident tone he had used at the country club just 2 nights ago. "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral while I poured myself coffee in the kitchen that still felt too quiet without his morning routine. "About us. About what happened. I think I may have acted too hastily." There was a pause, and I could almost see him struggling with words that didn't come naturally to a man accustomed to being in control. "Can I come over? Please?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Desmond." "Carol, I'm serious. There are things we need to discuss. Financial things. Legal things. This whole situation is more complicated than I realized." Now that was interesting. I glanced at my watch. "I have a meeting at 9, but I suppose you could come by for a few minutes." "I'll be right there." He arrived 20 minutes later, looking like a man who had spent the night wrestling with demons. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed with fatigue or stress. When I opened the door, he attempted his old charming smile, but it came across as desperate. "You look tired," I observed, leading him to the living room where we had shared thousands of conversations over the years. "I haven't been sleeping well." He settled into his usual chair, but his posture was different. Less commanding, more uncertain. "Carol, I want you to know that I never intended for things to happen the way they did at the club. How did you intend for them to happen?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from times when he was preparing to argue a difficult case. "I thought it would be easier, cleaner, a quick break rather than a drawn-out divorce process." "Easier for whom?" "For all of us." but I realize now that I hurt you unnecessarily, and I'm sorry for that." I studied his face, noting the fine lines that seemed deeper than they had been just days ago. "What's really going on, Desmond? This isn't like you to apologize for anything." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I think I may have made a mistake." "Which mistake would that be? The affair, the public humiliation, or the pregnancy?" His head shot up, surprise flickering across his features. "Marlo told you about the baby?" "She told me several things. She's more perceptive than you give her credit for." Something shifted in his expression, a wariness I had never seen before. "What else did she tell you?" "Oh, why don't you tell me what you came here to say, and then we'll see if there's anything left to discuss." Desmond stood up and began pacing, another sign of the anxiety he was trying to hide. "I've been doing some thinking about our finances, about the divorce settlement, about how we're going to divide everything. And I realized that I don't actually know as much about our financial situation as I thought I did. You always handled the household accounts, the investments, the retirement planning. I've been so focused on the practice that I never paid attention to the details." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing, so I went through our files last night, trying to get a clear picture of what we have, what we owe, what we can expect from the division of assets. He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "Carol, I can't find half of our financial records. The investment accounts you mentioned over the years, the retirement funds, even our savings accounts. Either the paperwork is missing, or I never understood what you were actually doing with our money." "What are you asking me, Desmond?" "I'm asking you to help me understand where we stand financially so we can work out a fair settlement." I set down my coffee cup and looked at him steadily. "A fair settlement. Yes, I know I've hurt you, but we're both adults. We both contributed to this marriage, and we both deserve to walk away with our share of what we built together." The audacity of it took my breath away. After 25 years of dismissing my contributions, after humiliating me publicly, after getting another woman pregnant, he wanted me to help him figure out how to take half of everything I had built. "Tell me something," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "In all your research last night, did you happen to look at the lease agreement for your office?" A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Humor me." "No, I didn't look at the lease. Why would I? That's a business expense. It doesn't affect our personal assets." I walked to the bookshelf and retrieved one of the folders from my hidden safe, returning to set it on the coffee table between us. "This is the lease agreement for your office space, the building at 225 Commerce Street." He picked up the document, frowning as he read. I watched his face change as the details registered. The property owner listed on the lease wasn't some anonymous corporation. It was CBR Holdings, a company he had never heard of. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "Who is CBR Holdings?" "Carol Beth Rawlings Holdings. My maiden name, my company." I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "I own the building where you practice law, Desmond. You've been paying rent to me for the past 18 months. The color drained from his face. "That's impossible." I opened the folder wider, revealing property deeds, business licenses, and bank statements. "I own 23 commercial properties in this city. Your office building is just one of them. I also own the strip mall where you get your hair cut, the parking garage where you park your car downtown, and the building that houses 3 of your biggest clients." Desmond stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "How is this possible? How do I not know about this?" "Because you never asked. Because you assumed that your little wife with her little projects couldn't possibly be doing anything important." I pulled out another set of documents. "These are the client referral agreements that saved your practice 3 years ago. The cases that you thought proved your reputation was growing. They came from my consulting clients. Carol, this doesn't make sense. If you had this kind of money, this kind of business success, why didn't you tell me? I looked at him with genuine amazement. Desmond, I tried to tell you for years. Every time I mentioned a new client or a successful project, you would pat my hand and change the subject. When I suggested we celebrate my first property purchase, you said it was cute that I was playing businesswoman, but that we shouldn't get carried away. He sank back into his chair, the weight of realization settling over him like a lead blanket. Last year, when you wanted to expand your office space, do you remember how quickly everything fell into place? How the perfect building became available at exactly the right rent? You're saying that was you, too? I made sure you got that space because I thought we were building something together. I thought your success was our success. I gathered the papers back into the folder. I was wrong. Desmond was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I had revealed. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. How much are we talking about here? What's the total value of all this? My business assets are worth approximately $2,800,000. My monthly income from rentals and consulting fees averages around $30,000. I closed the folder with a soft snap, none of which will be part of any divorce settlement, since it's all in my name alone and was acquired with my own earnings. The silence that followed was profound. I could almost see the calculations running through his mind, the realization of what he had thrown away, what he had lost. "Carol," he said finally, his voice thick with something that might have been regret. "I had no idea. If I had known." "If you had known, what? You wouldn't have cheated? You wouldn't have humiliated me publicly? You wouldn't have gotten your girlfriend pregnant?" I stood up, signaling that this conversation was over. "Or you just wouldn't have been so careless about discarding the golden goose. That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Desmond, you spent 25 years treating me like an accessory to your life. You dismissed my achievements, ignored my contributions, and made me feel like I should be grateful for your attention. And when you decided you wanted something younger and prettier, you threw me away like yesterday's newspaper. Don't talk to me about fair." He stood up too, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can work this out. We can fix this. I made a mistake with Marlo, but it's not too late. We can annul the engagement, end things with her. We can start over." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want to abandon your pregnant girlfriend to come back to me now that you realize I have money?" "It's not about the money, Carol. It's about us. About what we built together." "What we built together?" I walked to the front door and opened it. "Desmond, you didn't even know what I was building. You thought I was decorating while I was creating an empire. You thought I was dependent while I was becoming independent. You thought I was helpless while I was becoming powerful." He followed me to the door, his face pale with panic. "Carol, please, we need to talk about this more. We need to figure out how to move forward." "We already have figured out how to move forward. You made that decision at the country club." I stepped aside, holding the door open. "You chose Marlo and your new life. Live with it. But the practice, the clients, the office lease, if you control all of that, then you'd better hope you can afford to pay your own way from now on." I met his eyes steadily. "Goodbye, Desmond." He hesitated on the threshold, looking like he wanted to say more, but whatever words he was searching for didn't come. Finally, he walked out, and I closed the door behind him with quiet finality. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for several minutes before driving away. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the knowledge of how completely he had misjudged the woman he had been married to for 25 years. As I cleared away the coffee cups, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. But for the first time in decades, I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. And Desmond was about to learn that some mistakes can't be undone. The eviction notice was delivered on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after Desmond's desperate visit to my house. I wasn't there to see his face when he received it, but Jennifer, my property manager, called me with the details. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach, she reported with professional detachment. He kept asking if there was some mistake, if he could speak to the property owner directly. I told him all communications needed to go through the management company, just like you instructed. Did he say anything else? He asked for 30 days to work something out. I reminded him that his lease clearly states that failure to pay rent for 3 consecutive months constitutes grounds for immediate termination. He's been late with payments since January, and March's rent never came at all. I had been tracking Desmond's financial decline through the rent payments, or lack thereof. What he didn't know was that I had been covering his missed payments myself, keeping his office space available while I decided what to do. But after our conversation last week, after his pathetic attempt to reconcile now that he knew about my wealth, I had stopped covering for him. Give him 48 hours to remove his belongings, I told Jennifer. After that, change the locks and put the space up for lease. Already have 3 potential tenants interested, she said. It's a prime location. It was indeed a prime location. I had purchased the building specifically because I knew it would attract successful law firms and financial companies. The fact that Desmond had ended up there was partly coincidence, partly my own subtle maneuvering when he mentioned wanting to expand. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 18 months, he had been paying rent to me while having an affair, planning his exit strategy, and treating me like an insignificant appendage to his life. Now he was learning what it felt like to be truly powerless. My phone rang again an hour later. This time it was Marlo. "Carol, I need to see you. Something's happened." Her voice was strained, frightened in a way that made me pay attention. "What kind of something?" "Desmond. He's lost his mind. Can we meet, please?" We arranged to meet at the same cafe where we had talked before. When I arrived, Marlo was already there, looking pale and shaken. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. "He came to my apartment last night," she said without preamble. "He was drunk and angry and saying things that scared me." "What kind of things?" "He blamed me for everything. He said if I hadn't pressured him into leaving you, none of this would have happened. He said you were going to destroy him financially, and it was all my fault." She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Then he started talking about the baby, about how it was going to ruin his life, how he couldn't afford a child now that you were cutting him off. A cold anger settled in my chest. Whatever Desmond's faults, whatever he had done to me, the child Marlo was carrying was innocent. Did he hurt you? Not physically, but he said things. Terrible things about what kind of mother I would be, about how the baby would be better off if it was never born. Tears started to flow down her cheeks. I realized that this is who he really is, not the charming, successful man I thought I fell in love with, but someone who blames everyone else for his problems and says cruel things when he's cornered. I handed her a napkin from the dispenser, remembering all the times Desmond had said cruel things to me when he was frustrated or embarrassed. The difference was that I had learned to expect it from him. Marlo was discovering it for the first time. "What are you going to do?" "I'm leaving him," she said with more strength than I had heard in her voice before. "I can't raise a child with someone like that. I won't." "Where will you go?" "My sister lives in Portland. She said I can stay with her until the baby comes, help me get back on my feet." Marlo looked at me with something that might have been gratitude. "Meeting you showed me something important. You survived 25 years with him and built something amazing despite him trying to keep you small. If you could do that, maybe I can figure out how to raise this baby on my own." I found myself feeling genuinely proud of her. In just a few days, she had gone from being the other woman who helped destroy my marriage to being a young woman making brave choices for herself and her child. "You're stronger than you think," I told her, "and smarter than Desmond ever gave you credit for." "There's something else," she said, hesitating. "Yesterday, before he came to my apartment, I got a call from someone at his office, A woman who said she was his secretary. She was crying. About what? Apparently, Desmond had to let her go because he can't make payroll. She'd been with the firm for 8 years, and he fired her with no notice, no severance. She called me because she thought maybe I could talk to him, convince him to pay her what he owed. My stomach tightened. Firing long-term employees without notice or compensation was exactly the kind of thing Desmond would do when he felt cornered. Take it out on the people who couldn't fight back. She also said there were other people he owed money to. Vendors, contractors, other lawyers who had worked on cases with him. She was scared that he was going to disappear and leave everyone holding unpaid bills. I thought about this information as I drove home. Desmond wasn't just losing his office space. His entire practice was collapsing, and he was hurting innocent people in the process. People who had trusted him, worked for him, believed in his promises. That evening, I made several phone calls. The first was to Desmond's former secretary, Margaret, whose number I found through my own business contacts. She was indeed crying when she answered. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. Mr. Patterson owes me 3 weeks of pay, and my rent is due tomorrow. Margaret, this is Carol Patterson, Desmond's wife." There was a surprised silence. Oh, Mrs. Patterson, I heard about. I mean, I know you and Mr. Patterson are. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. Tell me exactly what Desmond owes you. 3 weeks of salary comes to $2,100. But honestly, I'd be happy with anything. I know he's having financial troubles. You'll have a check tomorrow, I told her. And Margaret, start looking for a new job. Don't wait for Desmond to get back on his feet. The second call was to the building maintenance company that Desmond had stiffed for 6 months of cleaning services. The third was to the legal research firm that was owed $4,000 for case preparation work. The fourth was to the court reporter who had worked dozens of cases for Desmond's firm and hadn't been paid in 3 months. By the end of the evening, I had written checks totaling nearly $15,000 to cover debts that Desmond had walked away from. Not because I felt obligated to him, but because these people didn't deserve to suffer for his failures. The final call came from Desmond himself at nearly midnight. "Carol, what the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm sorry. What?" "Margaret called me. She said you paid her, and I got calls from 3 other people saying the same thing. You can't just pay my business debts without talking to me first." I was quiet for a moment, amazed by his audacity. "I wasn't paying your debts, Desmond. I was helping people you hurt when you decided to abandon your responsibilities. Those are business obligations. They're not your concern. They became my concern when you chose to handle them the same way you handled our marriage, by walking away and leaving other people to clean up the mess. Carol, you can't do this. You can't interfere with my practice like this." "What practice?" I asked softly. "From what I understand, you don't have an office, you don't have employees, and you don't have clients. What exactly am I interfering with?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long that I thought he might have hung up. "This is about revenge," he said finally. "You're trying to destroy me because I chose Marlowe over you." "Desmond, I didn't destroy anything. You did that all by yourself." I looked out my bedroom window at the city lights below, feeling calmer than I had in months. "You chose to have an affair. You chose to humiliate me publicly. You chose to take on debts you couldn't pay and make promises you couldn't keep. You chose to hurt innocent people when your house of cards started falling down. But you could fix this. You could help me rebuild. We were married for 25 years, Carol. That has to count for something." It did count for something. It counted for 25 years of me supporting your career, your reputation, your success, while you treated me like an afterthought. It counted for years of me building something real while you built something fake. I walked away from the window, my decision made. But that's over now. "Carol, please." "Goodbye, Desmond. Don't call me again." I hung up and turned off my phone. In the quiet of my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete peace. The man who had controlled so much of my emotional energy for so many years no longer had any power over me. 2 days later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marlo had indeed left for Portland. She had quietly packed her things and disappeared while Desmond was at a bar, drinking away his sorrows and blaming everyone but himself for his situation. He was alone now, facing the consequences of his choices without the financial cushion I had provided, or the young woman he had convinced himself loved him. His practice was gone, his reputation was in ruins, and the people he had counted on had all walked away. I should have felt sorry for him. After 25 years together, perhaps I should have felt some sympathy for the man who had once been my partner. Instead, I felt nothing but relief. The chapter of my life that had been defined by his needs, his ambitions, his approval, was finally closed. And I was free to write the next one entirely on my own terms. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my new house, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. The coastal town of Mendocino was exactly what I had dreamed of during all those years when I was too busy building an empire to think about where I actually wanted to live. The house itself was perfect in its imperfection. A weathered Victorian cottage perched on a bluff overlooking the sea, with rooms that caught the morning light and a wraparound porch where I could drink my coffee while listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. I had paid $550,000 for it, cash, and had spent another $100,000 making it exactly what I wanted. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself. The move from the city had been surprisingly easy. I had kept the most profitable of my rental properties and sold the others to investors who appreciated their value. My consulting business had actually grown stronger since the divorce, as word spread about the woman who had quietly built a real estate empire while everyone thought she was just a lawyer's wife. I had 3 new clients this month alone, successful women who wanted help diversifying their investments and building long-term financial security. There was something deeply satisfying about helping other women discover their own economic power. My phone buzzed with a text message as I finished my morning coffee. It was from Marlo, something that had become a pleasant routine over the past few months. Baby kicked for the first time yesterday, felt like a little soccer player in there. Hope you're enjoying the ocean this morning. I smiled as I typed back. That's wonderful news. How are you feeling? Good. Tired, but good. My sister says I'm glowing, but I think that's just the pregnancy hormones making me sweat all the time. Marlo had thrived in Portland. She had gotten a job with a marketing firm, found a comfortable apartment near her sister, and was preparing for motherhood with a strength that impressed me. We had stayed in touch, an unlikely friendship born from shared experience with the same disappointing man. She had never asked me for money or help, though I had quietly set up a trust fund for her unborn child. The baby would have college tuition covered, regardless of what happened with Desmond's legal obligations. Some gifts were given not for gratitude, but for peace of mind. Another message came through, this one from Jennifer at the property management company. FYI, your ex-husband called again yesterday asking about lease terms for the Commerce Street building. I told him the same thing I've told him for the past 3 months. The space is leased to a family law firm through 2027. He didn't take it well. I shook my head, amazed that Desmond was still trying to reclaim his old office space. His persistence would have been admirable if it wasn't so pathetic. According to mutual acquaintances, he had been struggling to rebuild his practice from a shared office space in a less desirable part of town. Most of his former clients had moved on to other attorneys, and his reputation had taken a serious hit when word spread about how he had treated his employees and vendors. He had tried to contact me directly dozens of times over the past 6 months. Phone calls that went straight to voicemail, emails that were automatically filtered to a folder I never opened, letters that were returned unopened. I had made my position clear, and I had no interest in rehashing old grievances or listening to new apologies. The only communication I had acknowledged was the formal divorce papers, which I had signed without hesitation or negotiation. Desmond got to keep his personal belongings, his car, and his struggling law practice. I kept everything else, which was exactly what I had always owned anyway. My lawyer had been amazed by how simple the process was. Most divorces involving significant assets take months or years to resolve, he had told me. But since everything of real value is in your name alone, there's nothing to divide. It's almost like you were never financially married at all. Which, I realized, was exactly the truth. For 25 years, I had been building my own life while maintaining the illusion of a shared one. As I prepared to go inside and start my workday, I noticed a familiar car pulling into my driveway. My chest tightened with annoyance and something that might have been fear. Desmond's silver sedan looked out of place in this peaceful setting, like a storm cloud on a clear day. I watched from the deck as he got out of the car and looked around at my new life with obvious shock. He had probably expected to find me living in some modest apartment, struggling to make ends meet without his financial support. Instead, he was seeing a $500,000 house with ocean views and a well-tended garden. He climbed the steps to my porch slowly, like a man approaching a dangerous animal. When he reached the top, he stopped and stared at me for a long moment. "You look good," he said finally. "Happy. What do you want, Desmond?" He was thinner than he had been 6 months ago, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. His clothes were still expensive, but they hung differently on him now, like costumes that no longer fit the character he was trying to play. "I wanted to see you, to talk to you." "About what?" "About us. About the mistakes I made. About whether there might be a way to fix things." I studied his face, looking for signs of the man I had once loved. "There is no us anymore, Desmond. There hasn't been for a long time. Carol, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But we had 25 good years together before everything went wrong." "No," I said quietly. "We had 25 years where I made the best of a bad situation. There's a difference." He flinched as if I had slapped him. "That's not fair. We were happy. We built a good life together." "I built a good life. You lived in it." I walked to the railing and looked out at the ocean, hoping he would take the hint and leave. "What happened to Marlo, Desmond? The woman you loved enough to humiliate me in front of 100 people? She left. She took the baby and left." His voice cracked slightly. "She said she couldn't trust me to be a good father. Can you blame her? Carol, I need you to understand something. I never stopped loving you. The thing with Marlo, it was a mistake. A midlife crisis. I got scared of getting older, of losing my edge, and I made stupid choices." I turned to face him, seeing the desperation in his eyes. "You didn't lose me because you had an affair, Desmond. You lost me because of how you treated me during the affair. You lost me because when you decided you wanted something different, your first instinct was to destroy me rather than simply leave me. I was trying to protect you from a messy divorce. I thought if I made a clean break. By humiliating me at our vow renewal ceremony, by telling our friends and colleagues that I wasn't good enough for you anymore." I shook my head. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your image. You wanted to be the successful man who traded up for a younger model, not the man who abandoned his wife of 25 years. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. I can spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "I don't want you to make it up to me. I don't want anything from you at all." "Carol, please. I'm drowning here. The practice is failing. I can't afford the office rent. I can't even afford the apartment I'm living in. I need help." And there it was. The real reason he had driven 3 hours to find me in my new life. Not love, not remorse, but need. Financial need. "You want money," I said. "I want my wife back. But yes, I need help getting back on my feet. You could help me restart the practice. We could be partners this time. Real partners." I looked at this man who had shared my bed for 25 years, who had fathered no children with me, who had built his entire identity on a foundation I had provided without his knowledge, and I felt nothing but pity. "No," I said simply. "Carol, you don't understand. I'm about to lose everything. If I can't make the rent on my current office, I'll have to close the practice entirely. I'll have to file for bankruptcy." "Then file for bankruptcy." He stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "You can't mean that. Desmond, for 6 months you've been trying to contact me. 6 months of calls and emails and letters. Do you know what you've never once said in any of those messages?" He frowned, clearly confused by the question. "You've never once said you're sorry for what you did to me. Not sorry that you got caught. Not sorry that things didn't work out the way you planned, but actually sorry for hurting me." I moved toward the door of my house, ready for this conversation to be over. "You're not here because you love me. You're here because you need me, and I don't need to be needed anymore. Carol, wait. Goodbye, Desmond. Don't come back here again." I went inside and locked the door behind me, listening as his car started up and drove away. Through my front window, I watched his taillights disappear down the coastal highway, carrying him back to whatever remained of the life he had chosen. That evening, I called Marlo to check on her. "How are you feeling about becoming a mother?" I asked. "Terrified and excited in equal measure," she admitted. "But good. Really good. My sister thinks I should ask Desmond for child support, but honestly, I'd rather do this on my own than deal with him. That might be wise. Independence is worth more than money, especially when the money comes with strings attached." Speaking of independence, I have some news. I got a promotion at work. They're making me a senior account manager, which means I can afford a bigger apartment and proper health insurance for the baby. That's wonderful news. I keep thinking about something you said to me that day at the cafe, about how some bonds can't be broken by silence. I used to think that meant you were trapped by your marriage, but now I think you meant something different. What do you think I meant? I think you meant that the bond between who you really are and who you want to become can't be broken by other people's expectations, that you can be silent about your strength, but the strength is still there. I smiled, looking out at the ocean that had become my daily companion. You're going to be a very wise mother. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this was what happiness felt like. Not the desperate gratitude of someone whose basic needs were being met, but the quiet satisfaction of someone who had built exactly the life she wanted. I had spent 25 years hiding my power to keep peace in a marriage that was never really peaceful. Now I was 54 years old, financially independent, and answerable to no one but myself. Desmond could keep trying to reclaim what he thought he had lost. But what he had never understood was that he had never really had it in the first place. I was not something to be owned or controlled or discarded. I was free. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.